Well, the United Nations General Assembly is underway in New York. Just a short time ago, U.S. President Barack Obama addressed the UNGA about the Mali massacre, the mall massacre in Kenya, and other recent global acts of terrorism.
In Kenya, we've seen terrorists target innocent civilians in a crowded shopping mall, and our hearts go out to the families of those who've been affected. In Pakistan, nearly 100 people were recently killed by suicide bombers outside a church. In Iraq, killings and car bombs continue to be a terrible part of life. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda has splintered into regional networks and militias, which doesn't give them the capacity at this point to carry out attacks like 9/11, but does pose serious threats to governments and diplomats, businesses and civilians all across the globe.
Now, for more insight on the UNGA, we are joined by VOA UN correspondent Margaret Besheer. Hello, Margaret.
Hi, Vincent.
Yes, the president spoke quite a bit about a number of issues, but what was he aiming to achieve in this particular speech today?
Well, definitely he laid out his priorities for the next 2.5 years, the final 2.5 years of his administration in terms of foreign policy in the Middle East. That was the focus. And the three big headlines are that on Iran, he's willing to pursue better relations with the Iranians. On Syria, he defended his idea about having military intervention there. He said it's still on the table. You know, people criticize the United States for not interfering, and then when they do interfere, they criticize them and vice versa. So he was sort of defensive about that. And then he said that he wants to work on the Israeli-Palestinian crisis, saying that that has contributed a great deal to instability in the region. So those were the three main focuses of his foreign policy in the region in the coming 2.5 years.
And his speech sounded very kind of intellectual, academic than previously, would you say?
Well, he is a lawyer, and I think he laid out his arguments perhaps the way a lawyer would, particularly on Syria, laying out the various points. He talked about the chemical weapons. He said that those should be eliminated. You know, he sort of laid out all the points. He spoke about the humanitarian aspects of it. And so he did sort of really back up each of his arguments, I think.
Yes. Very briefly, we know that for the Africans watching this show, they're interested to know what is being discussed at the United Nations General Assembly, what is going on the sidelines regarding Africa.
Right. Well, there is a lot going on about Africa on the sidelines. There'll be a special meeting about the crisis in the Central African Republic with the European Union hosting that. They're going to be working on progress, building on progress in Somalia. There'll be a special session on the Sahel and food insecurity. The Secretary General today noted the Mali elections that were just held in July, saying that we need to build on the credible elections that were held. So I think there'll be some talks about Mali. So I think there's quite a bit. Oh, DRC, the framework agreement in DRC, there was a meeting about that yesterday. So there's quite a bit going on Africa. It may not be at the podium, but it's certainly happening here in the corridors and the conference rooms.
And very quickly, has there been any president or leader who has spoken on the sidelines, an African leader, that you can probably just mention a little bit of what they said?
You mean at the podium?
Yes.
Yeah, Goodluck Jonathan just spoke a few minutes ago. He spoke about, of course, the tragedy in Kenya, and he said that in Nigeria they're fighting terrorists themselves in the northeastern part of the country. And he mentioned piracy. He said that's a real menace to Africa, to the continent. You know, so he spoke about development, the Millennium Development Goals. So these were some of the topics that he touched upon.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And that's Margaret Besheer, VOA UN correspondent, reporting for us live there from the United Nations in New York. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com.